Welcome to Cocktails with the Krewe, Season 2, Episode 1. Standard legal disclaimer, y'all. This recording is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. You should not act or refrain from acting based on the content of this recording. Always contact your attorney for advice regarding your particular legal matters. Now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Cocktails with the Krewe. We are so excited to get this season started. We have been collaborating recently with the Cannery and Toulouse Gourmet for their vlog, Cannery Chat, and we just had such a great time talking with Kelly and Ashley that we had to bring them on, and our new season will be hosted at the Cannery moving forward. So we're so excited to have this new season launch. So we have some new faces. Rena, who you might recognize from some of our season 1 episodes, is one of our new hosts on Cocktails with the Krewe. Kelly Levy with Toulouse Gourmet and the Cannery. And today's guest on our virtual, socially distant first episode of Cocktails with the Krewe is Julianne Duhe-Keating from the Keating Law Firm. And today we're going to be talking about contracts from both the vendor perspective and the couple's perspective. So we're all excited to talk about that. I know Julianne has a lot of great information for us, and we're excited to hear what she has to say. So until we get started with that, let's go ahead and let everyone introduce themselves, and welcome.
Hi, I'm Rena Sweeney, owner of Alchemy Events and creative director for New Orleans Weddings Magazine. And I am really excited to be hosting. I was on 2 episodes in season 1, and now as creative director, I'll be hosting along with Jessica. So super excited.
Hi, everybody. This is Kelly Levy with the Cannery and Toulouse Gourmet Catering. As you well know, we started a little vlog, Ashley, Dubrett, and myself, called the Cannery Chat, and we called on Jessica and Rena to join us to kind of inform everybody of just things that we are doing during this pandemic. Unfortunately today, Ashley is unable, our cocktail connoisseur, which we get really excited about all of the great drinks that she brings to the table and we get to enjoy. But join us this season. We're excited to host it at the Cannery and to have some good information brought to everybody with us with the Cocktails with the Krewe.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Julianne Duhe-Keating, and I'm the owner of the Keating Law Firm. Thank y'all so much.
So since Ashley couldn't be here today, she usually, as Kelly mentioned, does our cocktails. I stepped in and I got our cocktail for the day. We're going to call this Don't Cry Over Spilled Coffee. It's a Kahlua iced coffee. And I will have the recipe for you in the comments and in the video notes. But it's super yummy. It's Kahlua ice, cold brew coffee and milk. Super easy. And you'll see why we call it Don't Cry Over Spilled Coffee when you see the picture we took of. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the questions. I know Rena has a bunch of questions. I think we've all been watching message boards online, seeing questions that both couples and vendors have about contracts. There's so much that none of us were expecting with this pandemic. I don't think there's very many professionals in this industry that had a pandemic clause in their contract. It's highly unlikely. So Julianne's going to answer all of our questions about contracts today, and let's get started. Rena.
So Julianne has been my attorney for many, many years, and close friend. And so this is something that she and I originally spoke about, of course, when the pandemic hit, and I reached out and was like, okay, what do I need to do to update my contracts? And I know vendors all across the board have been doing this, but I also think it's important for us to look at it from a client perspective, because couples really don't know what to look for, what's reasonable or not reasonable. I get that a lot of times with clients will come hire me for their wedding, and they may have already signed contracts with other vendors, and then partway into the planning process, they realize, I need some help. And so I get this question a lot, and I think many people just really don't know, is this reasonable? Is it not reasonable? What does this mean? So what are some of those things, Julianne, that you think are standards in contracts that are very reasonable? Clients shouldn't be worried about seeing those, or things that you think we're going to see moving forward that couples need to be aware of, and just understand what those are and what they mean and that they're okay.
Well, I think that you ladies definitely know that brides and grooms are going to see potentially 10 to 15 vendors from the beginning to, walking down the aisle, and everybody's going to have their own contract. That's a lot for brides and grooms to deal with and keep up with. And everybody's going to have their own contract. There's no standard contract in the industry. So everybody's going to have their own contract and their own language that they have to look at. I honestly think that we haven't dealt with something of this nature since probably the 1900s. So I think everybody's going to run to an attorney to have their contracts changed. So it's going to be something new. It's going to be something different, and it's going to be a lot of changes. I think a lot of attorneys are going to encourage contracts to have, if they don't already have it, force majeure clauses. Clauses dealing with if in the future, if we do have a pandemic, what happens for refunds, rescheduling clauses. I think a lot of those new clauses are going to be included in contracts. It's going to be scary. It's going to be different, but I have a feeling that it's going to be included in a lot of contracts moving forward.
So what if a couple is wondering, what would the force majeure clause include or cover, and how would that affect them as the client?
So it's normally called like an act of God clause. That's what a layman's term is. It's something that it's not in every state. It's different depending upon the jurisdiction. Here in Louisiana, we first kind of saw dealing with Hurricane Katrina. We don't know yet if it is going to apply to the pandemic and COVID-19. I think it's going to take litigation to determine how and where it's going to apply in contracts, business interruption cases, even so far as when broad as in divorce cases and things of that nature. It's going to take judges and case law and litigation to determine that. But it is considered an act of God clause. And so unfortunately, it's going to take some time to determine where and how that applies to vendors' contracts.
But for couples, should they be concerned if they see that, or would that be something that they need to think twice about signing, or is it something that you think as an attorney, they should feel comfortable with signing that because that's protecting both sides? What do you?
Well, honestly, it's in most insurance contracts that you see. Like when you get homeowners insurance, it's included. When you get business renters insurance, it's included. It's included in a lot of daily contracts that you have every day. You just probably don't realize it's already included in there. It's going to be included in more common contracts that you see every day, more so now because of the pandemic.
Because I see that a lot. Clients don't really know what the wording means, and they're concerned, like, oh, should I sign this? Is this okay? Or, so that's good to hear. And then what are some other things that you think from a couple's perspective, like right now with people postponing or moving events, should couples ask for an addendum to their contracts if, say, they've rescheduled the wedding to a different date, or if the vendor just sends an email saying, oh, I'm rescheduling you for this new date, and this is the agreement, whether it's a new fee or rescheduling fee or no fee at all? Is the email sufficient, or should they ask for an addendum or something else?
As an attorney, I always recommend you get everything in writing, always. So on both sides, whether you be the bride or the groom or the vendor, I always recommend you get everything in writing. Emails sometimes suffice, but I prefer everything in writing. So I would probably recommend doing a new contract.
I would like to ask this because I am in the process of rewriting my contract. And in that time, I have either postponed and rescheduled or booked incoming new business. So in lieu of writing an addendum or adding an addendum to our contract, which we already have a force majeure clause in. I am just sending out written emails, signing that, e-signing the email and letting them know that this is saying that this is your date, because that's a lot of back and forth paperwork. Is that sufficient talking about this? You're saying that email, it isn't, not writing, but those are my words and I'm standing by it and it's filed in their file. It's their sense of peace to know, because that back and forth of adding an addendum and getting it signed and all that kind of stuff, I just thought it would be easier to send them that contract when done. And it is taking a little longer than anticipated, and I truly understand, because this is something unprecedented and they are researching it, because again, does it fall in that realm of business interruption? There's so many different things, and even though we have that force majeure, if we're able to open our doors even at 25% capacity, it is that question. So I just would rather, for them and for myself, to have it all ironed out. Is that wise or not?
At the end of the day, what the courts look at is the four corners of a contract. They look at the four corners of the contract of what's written inside. So that's why I generally give, my advice is, you have a written contract with a client for a reason. It's what's written on the four corners and what's inside. Any addendum to that is additional to it. It goes to support the documentation of the four corners and what's written inside. Any information I'm giving you today, I as an aside, I recommend that you definitely talk to any attorney who has experience in contract negotiation and contract litigation, to look at your contract and give you advice on that. Anything I'm telling you today is just going to supplement that.
Right.
It's my recommendation that if you have to think about the possibility of litigating at something, it's the four corners of the contract, and that's what's going to be looked at. So this is new. This is completely new. This is a pandemic that we've never dealt with before. Contracts are going to be scrutinized to be determined as what the writing is, whether or not there's going to be reimbursements on either side, whether or not there can be, whether or not the government's allowing venues to open up, at what capacity. So for that, things need to be tidy and in order.
So is it okay, because I'm hoping that that contract will come in, say, this week, is it okay, do my clients just in the interim should they feel comfortable with me promising that date? I mean, I understand the whole contract part of it, but they just want some sense of relief that it's coming. The contract is coming.
I would follow it up with whatever official documentation that you have.
Of course, yes.
And like you mentioned, after Katrina, we saw a lot of changes in contracts. There was a lot of litigation. Jessica, Kelly, and I were all in this wedding industry back when Katrina hit, and went through that, experienced it, and saw a lot of other people go through it and how it affected them, either being sued or just couples that were affected. So those are things that I would assume court systems move slowly sometimes. So this is probably going to be a couple of years before we really know the full implications. Do you think?
I do. Litigation is timely and it's costly. Once you file suit, you have to get served, you go through discovery process, depositions, and then you're kind of waiting to get a court date. And litigation can take anywhere from 6 months to several years. One thing that when I'm looking at contracts for vendors of any sort, a lot of them don't have something called a mediation clause. It's something that I'm recommending to people to add in. A mediation clause, you get a third party who is neutral. It's very cost effective, and it definitely saves you time. If you don't have it in your current contracts, you can still mediate. You just have to get the other party to agree to do that. It definitely saves you a lot of money, and like I said, time-wise, you can get a mediator on board within weeks versus years with litigation. It's something that I highly recommend all contracts include a mediation clause.
So one other thing that
see, there's a lot of vendors. There's some wedding professionals that do a lot of work before the wedding, like Rena, for instance. And then there's quite a number of vendors. A photographer might do a photo shoot or other types of services. If something happens and there has to be a cancellation and the client wants a refund, should the vendor have in their contract stipulations about work done, a percentage of work done that they need to be paid for? They can't just be cut off because the actual event got canceled.
Like a non-refundable deposit. That's securing their services for that date. They are, that's a big problem that I'm seeing across the board with everybody. And it's sad because it's a matter of everybody wants to, of course, we have those emotions involved with, we're all going through this, but the fact is also understanding, like Jessica said, the time that and work that we've put in, and also just even securing, because a lot of these vendors, if you want this videographer, photographer, whatever, and you want to book them before somebody else does on one of those dates, they're going to ask you for a non-refundable deposit. And now I feel like that's coming up. Well, everybody wants their non-refundable, and it's understandable, but they're not understanding, how do we make it effective? Is there something that we can say that they understand what that deposit, not only is it securing the date, but anything, the communications, that's how we in turn get paid. That's our retainer to be.
It's for time and effort, and for that holding that spot. Correct. It has to be the type of verbiage that you use in the contract that specifically states that portion of the fee is non-refundable at the time that it's paid, and that it's understood that portion is non-refundable regardless if you cancel. Any other portion of it can be refundable, and you can use such verbiage as like up until 30 days of the event, a certain part is refundable. It's all in how you word and phrase the contract. And it just depends upon how specific you want to be in your language of the contract. And I think these events with the pandemic, people are going to have to be very specific with their contract. And if vendors are in that situation, photographers, situations like with Rena, if you have bride and grooms who are asking for portions back that are being disputed, I recommend taking that money and putting it aside that is being disputed. Everything else that you've earned, you've earned. If there's a portion that's being disputed, make sure they know that you're putting that money aside, and then let them know, I know this portion is disputed, I put it aside, let's try to resolve it. And that, try to resolve it before it escalates to litigation. And like I said, if there's someone that an attorney that you trust, contact them to see if they can assist you with negotiating that on your behalf before it escalates to litigation, because it'll save you time and money. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate this. This is a unique situation. We've never been in a pandemic before. The only thing I can really associate this to is Hurricane Katrina, but I think it's going to unfortunately take some litigation to get us some case law on this. But I'm free to answer any questions for any vendors or brides and grooms who are interested. But I do hope that people do work with each other. It's a tough situation out there, and I hope everybody works together to try to get it resolved amicably.
Yeah, we want to remember we're all in this together, and we all want to have a positive outcome. Try to find a way to work together to make it that no one loses. I mean, everybody has to lose somehow. That's something that I had learned years ago in law. Everybody loses, and that's the only way it's considered a good outcome, really.
You want brides married and get the vendors, doing what they love doing, baking the cakes and making, taking the pictures.
Wonderful special events.
Yes. So if anyone has questions for Julianne, please go ahead and you can email them to us or comment in the comments, and we will make sure she gets those, and she will be able to give answers and follow up. So we want to thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much.
And
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Look forward to seeing everybody on our next episode, and y'all take care. And as Kelly likes to say, be sure to social distance.
Sanitize, wash your hands.
Sanitize, wash your hands. All right, we'll see everybody next time. Y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Cocktails with the Krewe is a New Orleans Weddings Magazine production, sponsored by Alchemy Events, Toulouse Gourmet, and The Cannery. We'd like to thank our guest, Julianne Duhe-Keating of the Keating Law Firm, for joining us on this episode of Cocktails with the Krewe.